I actually have a really weird question for you, and you don't have to answer it.
Okay.
But I'm just curious, because I feel like we grew up in similar worlds.
Yeah.
Did your mom ever talk to you about
One time she did, and this was after I figured it all out on my own. And my mom and I have come a long way since then. And then I sort of educated myself, and then of course, like, life teaches you.
I didn't have girlfriends to talk about that kind of stuff
Yeah.
with. Like, none of the
Me
girls
either.
I knew growing up, I could ever have that conversation with them.
Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Thursday, September 2nd. And the Welcome to Plathville has been going on. We're on season 3 and episode 3. And Tuesday night's episode was Mariah and Olivia coming together to talk about having some girl time. Olivia basically said that once Mariah started dating Max, her friendship with Mariah kind of fell off the wayside, and they were just going to come together and talk, and not talk specifically about Barry and Kim. So you remember from season 1, Olivia played this huge role in helping Mariah sort of find her independence, and they went to California, and she just sort of got her eyes opened, and she helped Olivia with her work as a photographer. This season, we're seeing kind of a different Olivia and Ethan. They're heavily struggling in their marriage, going through an extremely dark time, with both of them sort of talking about, is our marriage going to work? Is it not going to work? Last week, Ethan talked about how he doesn't deal with things when it comes to Olivia, and instead he wants to go do things like fix the air conditioner, and even opened up to his brother about how if things didn't work out, he's feels reluctant to repair things because of that, because he wasn't sure if the relationship was salvageable and if it was going to be working. And their sticking point and their fights all centered around moving and whether or not they were going to move, and then just what they wanted to do in their lives, with Olivia wanting to travel and see the world, and Ethan feeling like he wanted to settle down and get his career going, and then just having different trajectories of how they were dealing with the trauma that they grew up in coming out of the fundamentalist world. One thing in the fundamentalist world that they don't really talk to kids about is doing it, or procreating, or having the front hugging on the bed. It is sinful, it is wrong, and so instead of even educating kids about the basics of it, it's very deviant, it's horrible, and you just have to wait until you're married, right? So you have to remain pure. So on this week's episode, Olivia and Mariah sat down and talked about the birds and the bees and what they learned growing up, and both of them admitting that they had very limited information given to them by their parents about what it was, only that it was sinful and wrong. If you were to be intimate with a partner, then you were not deemed whole, or you were, degraded, or you were not pure enough.
But the way my dad handled it was very much don't do X, Y, Z, or you're a prostitute. That was basically it.
Okay.
So, you're going straight to hell, that kind of thing. And so because of that, the kids in the situation end up having to learn a lot on their own.
Circle. You're kind of just taught that, it's a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you just don't do it. You don't sleep with somebody. And
Olivia asked Mariah whether or not she was using birth control, to which she said she was. And Mariah admitted that she learned a lot about intimate life through life. I'm guessing practice.
Just out of curiosity, have you found a good birth control?
I do.
Okay. Yes. Just checking. Yep.
Practice. And she did say she's on birth control. But Olivia was then asked if she was on birth control, and she said that she was, and then she went off. And she made a surprising statement, was that shortly after going off birth control, she ended up getting pregnant, and she miscarried the baby. And while talking to Mariah, she said that things with Ethan at that time and in their lives were so uncertain, and then she lost the baby, And she was happy she lost the baby and relieved that she didn't have the baby, because it was like a wake-up call to her that she wasn't ready to have a kid. There was things in her life she still needed to do, and they needed to work on their marriage.
When I did go off birth control, I did get pregnant a little while back, and I miscarried. Like, I felt bad for being relieved, but I was so relieved because it was like a wake-up call of like, I'm not ready to have a kid.
Yeah.
I don't want a kid.
This is what she said on the show. I felt like it was wrong for feeling the way, and I wish I'd had more people to talk to who could have been a sounding board or could have had a different perspective maybe than what I was raised with. I felt bad for being relieved, but I was so relieved because it was like a wake-up call, like, I'm not ready to have a kid. I don't want a kid. And she said she went on to tell Ethan, and he was just as relieved. And Ethan told Us Weekly that they plan to wait a few years and they want to travel around a bit. They're working on their marriage. Now, in an Instagram Live or an Instagram Q&A, she said that they don't want to have kids, one, because they want to travel, but two, because they've already come out of a situation where they were raising their siblings, and they didn't want to go back into a parental role after basically just leaving a parental role of raising their siblings or helping to raise their siblings. And they wanted more time as adults to explore the world, explore their relationship, heal from their trauma of abuse growing up in the fundamentalist world, and just enjoy life. They're very young, 23 years old. So having kids right away is not necessarily like they have to do it, because she could feasibly have kids for 20 more years at this point. But in the fundamentalist world, it's expected that you have a kid right away. So she claims that she's not on birth control. So if they don't want to have kids for a couple more years, that begs the question is what they're doing to prevent, whether or not if he's using things, or I don't know. She says that she's not on it. She didn't like the way it made her feel with hormones, which is super not uncommon. I think the hormonal birth control can have a lot of effects on people, and some people like it and some people don't, and some people don't react to it very well, and some women just don't want to be on it, and that's their prerogative. It's also her prerogative to not want to have kids right now, and it's also her prerogative to be relieved that she had a miscarriage, which I'm guessing is going to be a controversial feeling, because a lot of women who end up becoming pregnant and have a miscarriage, for them it is very devastating, because they wanted to be pregnant and they were trying for that baby and they got pregnant, and then they were invested and loved that child. And so when the loss happens, it feels like you're losing a part of yourself. You're losing a baby. And for her, the controversy is, I didn't want the baby. I miscarried the baby. I'm relieved I didn't have the baby. And obviously, in the world of miscarriage, there are women who do feel that way. And I think she is probably valid to say that she wishes she would have been able to talk about it, because I think it is probably very taboo for a woman who's going through a miscarriage who isn't devastated. Because some women aren't getting pregnant by actively trying to conceive. And if she wasn't preventing it, obviously she knew it was a possibility. But the fact that she was relieved is not something that women often openly talk about. And so I think, while it might be hard for someone to hear that has who has gone through infertility, who feels sad because they've had loss in their own life, I think not all people experience loss the same way, and not all people experience pregnancy the same way, and not everyone wants to be pregnant. And so I can already hear the naysayers saying that she's being insensitive for saying those things. But I just want to caveat that I think it's not invalid for her to feel that way. If she wasn't ready and she feels like it was for the best that it happened and she felt relieved, she shouldn't feel bad for feeling that way. So, and that's not to take away from the experience of anyone who's gone through it and they weren't relieved. Family planning is very personal. And if someone really deeply wants to be pregnant and they've had a loss and they wanted that baby so bad, it's devastating. And I think there's a place and a space for both, and neither person has to cancel out the other's emotions. It's just a hard topic to talk about sensitively, And I do think that her expressing that does open up a dialogue for other people to speak about their experiences on whether or not they've gone through loss and they felt relieved. I know personally I've never gone through a loss, but I've had friends that have gone through losses that were relieved. And for me, I never questioned that because for them it was what they wanted and they were okay with that. So it all comes down to how you process everything. But it's brave of her to open up about it. And then it was also pretty brave of them to talk about sex, and even more brave, I think, for Moriah to admit she might be having sex. So what are your thoughts about this? Tell me in the comments below. Bye, guys.